All right, that front bumper, it looks awesome. All right, so today what we're doing is we are actually going to be putting on our brand new, oh, good thing that landed in the box, our brand new CVT Tech primary. And I'll show you why when we take the OEM primary off, why it's a great idea to actually replace your primary when it comes to your Can-Am. So anyhow, let's get to it. To help break loose your clutch cover bolts, you want to spray some WD-40 on the bolts. That helps to break them loose. Then you can just break them loose again by using a ratchet, an 8mm socket, and then if you want to get them out the rest of the way, you can use an impact, but I recommend you break them loose by hand first with a little WD-40. That way you don't break the inserts on the backing plate of the clutch cover. Alright, so here are our primary and our secondary. I do have a cheap belt on here for now. It has gotten me through everything that I need it to. I've had it on here now for at least a year, and it happened 4th of July weekend, and I've been really tempted to replace this clutch ever since it failed on me. And what actually happened with the old belt was it came up and around and wrapped onto the primary and making it so that I actually could not go anywhere. So it was really interesting. And then when we got it back to camp, we started it back up, and she moved, but she didn't move as great as I thought she would. So this bolt here, it's a heavy duty bolt. It came from Can-Am Parts Guy, but I just wonder where all that grease came from, especially on the primary, or it could be just belt dust. So anyhow, we're gonna spread the secondary here. Alright, so we're gonna spread the secondary here, and the kind of bolt you want to use is a M8 by 1.25 by 8.8. Some people use 10s, 9s, but it's really a fine thread. In fact, before I shove it in here, I'm going to put some grease on this. And you can just need a little dab. Not really a whole lot. But we're just going to work it in there. And the reason why I say work it in there, because if you notice, I have a few cracks along the sides here. It's because the last thing you want is this here to actually separate and blow up in your face. And the reason why that happened was because I didn't have the helix and the back lined up perfectly, and that's how those cracks form. But other than that, it's perfectly good secondary to use. Alright, so here's what actually happened while I was removing the belt. The battery died, so we didn't really get to capture taking off the belt fully. But what you want to do is you want to take your 10 millimeter socket on your impact, and you want to drive that bolt into your secondary and open it wide up. And then once your secondary is open wide up, you can actually remove your belt. So you want to do that before you actually remove your primary. So I'm sorry the camera didn't catch it, and anyhow, let's get on to the next part of the video. Alright, so now we're gonna take our 10 millimeter Allen. We're gonna put it in there. And then one thing I like to do is I like to spray a little WD-40. And carefully and I say carefully because this primary here is actually spring loaded. If you're not careful with it and you just take it right off, you could have one half of your primary clutch actually launching at your stomach, knees, legs. You get the idea. Then I'll use my Milwaukee Fuel Impact with a 19 millimeter socket. Ooh, that popped off real easy. I'm really surprised that popped off that easy. Because normally I hear horror stories about guys actually fighting their primary clutch that they're trying to replace, and what ends up happening is they go to take this part out, and when they take this part out, they'll either have the wrong clutch puller, because note this is an OEM clutch puller, so it fits in there just nicely. And when they use the different clutch puller, they'll use some kind of Chinese clutch puller. I'm going to tell you this right now. Don't use it. If you use it, you're going to run into problems that you don't really want to deal with, and you can screw up all the threads on your crank, which that's really not a fun thing to have happen. So anyhow, I'm going to clean this up and we'll head outside the shop here because there's a little bit more room outside, and I'll explain to you why it's a good idea to replace your primary clutch on your Can-Am. Alright, so this is your OEM primary, and as you can tell, I'm going to press down, and then if you notice on the bottom how one side can spin and the other side sits freely, well, this is what actually causes most of our Can-Ams to actually have power loss, because you have one side slipping, and that's what causes the belt to slip or burn, and guys complain about burning out their belts. Now, this is the new primary. This is a CVT Tech primary. I got this from Motorsports Addicts up in Alberta, Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, in that area. So, which they're another great brand that's out there, so that you can actually deal with when it comes to your Can-Am. But if you notice, if I rotate this around with one hand, the sheaves are actually locked on the aftermarket primary. This causes power to be put down to the ground 95 to 100% better versus the OEM primary that does not have sheaves locking, that causes belt slippage, which also reduces your fuel economy, not only horsepower, but fuel economy, to be put down to the ground a lot less efficiently versus an aftermarket primary. So anyhow, let's go get our new aftermarket primary installed. All right, so we wiped off the crank here with some acetone here, just to make sure that there's nothing on there. After we took our grease, made sure that our brand new primary is ready to grip onto the crank here and ready to rip. So what we're gonna do now is we're gonna place our brand new CVT Tech primary clutch. We're gonna put it on there. We'll take our centering washer. Don't drop it. Place that on there. That's kind of being a little picky, but that's okay. If you want to, you can put grease on it. I'm not. So I'm gonna grab. So when installing your new clutch bolts or reinstalling your hardened clutch bolts, you want to use red Loctite instead of blue Loctite, because red Loctite actually withstands heat a lot better. And also too, when you are torquing down your bolts, you want to torque it down to 75 foot-pounds for a CVT Tech primary. And you also want to install your centering washer on the CVT Tech primary with the inside tabs facing in, and then you just screw down the bolt till it's snug, and then you use your torque wrench to actually torque down the primary. But I also got a trail block holder which actually holds on to the CVT Tech primary. I got that from Can-Am Parts Guy. Very highly recommended vendor. He can get you parts very quickly. So I used that instead of the block of wood method, because I really struggled with the block of wood method when it came to tightening down a brand new primary or even the OEM primary. So anyhow, let's get to it. Yep. And there we go. But I'm also looking at my clutches are not being aligned. They don't look like they're aligned properly. I wonder if that'll straighten out when I put the new belt on. I don't know. Alright, so what's really going on here is we don't really have an alignment between the new primary and the secondary, but we gotta remove the secondary anyway. So I really want to know what's, you know what? I'm thinking what also could be the problem is we have our spreader in there. Oh. You know what? It is because we have our spreader in there. All right. So what I'm going to do next is, because I don't really like removing the clutch here, I'm actually going, well, I don't like removing the secondary clutch because I have a little difficulty trying to reconnect the secondary clutch onto the spring and the helix in the back, because let's just put it this way, if you put it on the wrong way, that's how you'll get those cracks in your secondary. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this in time lapse. I'm going to get some steel wool. I'm going to clean up the sheaves in a circular pattern, and then I'm going to wipe everything down with acetone, and that should really do the trick for the secondary. Alright, here. So now we got our clutches, well, we got our clutches scuffed. One thing I'm going to do, since this is a new belt, I'm just going to go along with the Scotch-Brite. Just give them a gentle scuff so our belt can actually grip onto our clutches. And by the way, I went with the stock secondary for now, but anyhow, our clutch is spread out all the way. Now we're just going to carefully there we go. Do that, and we'll just that's not really the best idea to leave your bolt in there when you start it up. So now we'll try this again. Alright, so before I end this video out, please remember to clean the gaskets on your backing plate and then also your clutch cover. You want to clean all the mud out of that, so then you actually have a proper seal when it comes to your belt box. Also, when you are putting the screws back on through to hold on to your clutch cover, you want to make sure that you actually go down till it stops. Don't turn anymore once it stops, or else you're going to loosen up the brass inserts. And one thing I was doing when I was running the throttle, that actually helps tighten up the belt, so it's actually on there. I also thought I had an issue with an alignment when it came to the clutches and the belt. I'm looking at the belt now. The belt actually looks perfectly fine. When I ran the belts while I was out riding, I haven't had any issues. So before I close out this video, I would like to ask you if you could please like and subscribe if you like what you see, and we'll see you on the next video.